Thanks, Tim. Good evening, everyone. So, artificial intelligence, or AI for short, is all around us. It has many different uses. It's now an everyday technology. I'll talk a little bit about what it is. We might be using it without even realizing it, and it appears in all sorts of places. If you've ever noticed on your phone or your computer that you've got a facility now to search your photos by word, for example, you can type in the word green and it comes up with lots of photos that are green. That is a form of AI that is in use now on our phones. If you've ever used translation software on the computer, your words can be instantly translated into another language. That is using AI technology. If you've ever been online and an advert has popped up for a product that you've recently been looking at, that is AI. It's responding to the things you've been looking at online. If you've ever used Alexa or Siri, for example, then you're using AI. And if you've ever spotted any artwork in the street, you never know whether that's been designed by a computer as well. Here's a picture. It's just an example of something that's been created by a machine rather than a human. This is happening more and more as well in the artwork that we see around us. It's extremely useful, of course, in many ways, and it's all around us, as I've said. It's getting more powerful as the years go on. The technology is advancing. But it has many benefits. It helps a lot of people. Certainly in medicine, AI is used even to perform operations now. You find robots that are doing operations rather than people. And it's incredibly helpful in lots and lots of ways. But it can be a little bit scary as well. And I wanted to address some of that this evening. It's all about processing data really, really fast. That's how it works. That's what computers have always been really good at. They can calculate things very quickly, and you give them enough data and they can do amazing things. And it's getting very, very sophisticated. So just to give you an example of how it can fool us as well, one of these pictures was actually generated by a computer rather than a person. And my guess is that you would have no clue which one might be generated by a computer rather than taken as a real photo. One of these people does not exist. They've been created by a machine. The answer, out of interest, is image number 3 there. That's not a real person. So you never quite know whether to trust anymore what you're seeing on a screen, because so much can be done by computers now. And what we're seeing when we look at news articles is that this is appearing more and more in the news, and people are quite concerned about some of it. So, for example, a Brazilian singer a while ago was resurrected for a car advert. So they were able to talk and communicate in this video, whereas in fact they died a long time ago. And that just plays with people's minds a little bit about how ethical this might be. Some of the directions that this technology is now taking us in. And then you read headlines that really start to catch your eye. So Elon Musk is a tech billionaire entrepreneur. He's got a very big, powerful empire. And he and this other chap are going head to head because they're trying to race to create AI that is smarter than humans. So AI has reached the point where some people believe it might actually be smarter than human beings at some point. That's what people are pushing the technology to get towards. And some people are predicting that things could get very, very bad indeed. I don't know whether you can see this. This is a video from America, which is warning that AI could lead to the extinction of humanity. Now that's quite a strong term to use, and it's not a new one, because you might remember Professor Stephen Hawking, who died a couple of years ago. Way back in 2014, so nearly 10 years ago, he warned that AI could end mankind. Some people are now predicting that AI could become so powerful and so advanced that it could actually wipe out humanity. It could spell an end to mankind as we know it. And so this is the kind of thing I wanted to talk about this evening, really. Where if it got out of control, then what could stop it? What might stop this prediction that mankind could come to an end if this technology keeps growing in power. And we're going to look at this objectively and look at what the Bible and God think about all of this. And the Bible teaches us certain things that are quite relevant to this subject. And one of the things it teaches us is that there is a limit to what mankind can achieve with technology. It is not without a limit what mankind can achieve. Now, certain people that I've put on the screen there believe there is no limit to what man can achieve. The Bible teaches us differently, and we don't have to look very far into the Bible to see an example of that limit being applied. There is a project in the Bible that takes place that involved some very advanced technology. It was probably at the cutting edge of human achievement at the time it took place. And it's the episode of the Tower of Babel, way back in Genesis chapter 11. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to ask Tim to come forward and just lead us in that reading now. So it's Genesis chapter 11 and the first 9 verses.
Genesis chapter 11, verse 1 to 9. And the whole earth was of one language and of one speech. And it came to pass as they journeyed from the east that they found a plain in the land of Shinar, and they dwelt there. And they said one to another, Go to, let us make brick, and burn them thoroughly. And they had brick for stone, and slime they had for mortar. And they said, Go to, let us build us a city, and a tower, whose top may reach unto heaven. And let us make us a name, lest we be scattered abroad upon the face of the whole earth. And the Lord came down to see the city, and the tower which the children of men builded. And the Lord said, Behold, the people is one, and they have all one language, and this they begin to do. And now nothing will be restrained from them which they have imagined to do. Go to, let us go down, and there confound their language, that they may not understand one another's speech. So the Lord scattered them abroad from thence upon the face of all the earth, and they left off to build this city. Therefore is the name of it called Babel, because the Lord did there confound the language of all the earth from thence, and then from thence did the Lord scatter them abroad upon the face of the whole of all the earth.
Thank you. So I want to encourage you to see this for what it was. This was a building project on a very advanced scale. The ambition of these people who wanted to build this tower was to simply build higher than anyone had ever done before. And they wanted that achievement of being the ones who could build this tower that reached up to heavens. And remember, these men were used to building high. We know from archaeological discoveries that the buildings of this ancient world were impressive. They built ziggurats, didn't they, to worship their gods. They were used to building high buildings. But the ambition here is on a totally different scale, to build something that actually reached up to the sky, the heavens. But we know that what happened was they weren't able to complete their project. They didn't manage to achieve this. They were stopped before they got to the heavens. We read that the angels came down to see what was going on, and they managed to find a way of stopping it. So the lesson is that however high man aims in his achievements, God is always greater. God is always above what mankind can do. And we might wonder, were the faithful worried? There were still people of faith around at that time. There has always been a faithful few in the earth. God has never let faith die out right from the very beginning. So at this time, there must have been some faithful people around in the earth. And we wonder, were they worried by these people? Did they feel threatened by these people who wanted to wipe out the need for God, who wanted to show them that God was not powerful? How did they feel about it, these people of faith who were around on the earth at the time? What did they think? And did they feel that God would be able to stop them from completing their task? We wonder, don't we? But the reason it was confounded was by the onset of languages. So the angels came down and their language was confounded so that they could no longer understand one another's speech. That's interesting. That's how this attempt to unseat God was done. That their language was confounded and they were no longer able to communicate with each other. So communication was the key. Now that's really interesting, because communication is the key to everything that's going on with artificial intelligence and with technology and with the internet today. It's all about communication. And I suppose what they did, what the angels managed to do here in confounding this language, was a bit like shutting down the internet. That's the parallel with what might happen in today's world. And it's really interesting that languages are the key, because we read articles like this. Sorry, that's a little bit small, but it says language as a key to artificial intelligence. It's all about language. This is the important aspect of how this technology works. It says at the bottom there, the highly developed intelligence of humans cannot be separated from language. And the reason for that is pretty clear, that if you want people to work together collaboratively to achieve great things, they've got to be able to communicate with each other. And if they can't, then they're very limited, aren't they? Because what one person can achieve on their own is always going to be rather limited in comparison with what a whole group of people can do, and not just across countries, but also across time as well. Language is a really important thing. And we're told here that language is the key to what we're seeing in these developments today. They believed that nothing was impossible. That's interesting, isn't it? That's what it said there in verse, where was it? Verse 6, that nothing will be restrained from them which they've imagined to do. That was the thing that led the angels and the Lord God to act upon what was happening, the belief that nothing would be impossible. And there are people around today who believe that through AI nothing is impossible anymore. So the Bible teaches us then through episodes like this that there is a limit. God will not stand by and let these things happen ad infinitum, that there is a limit to what God will let mankind achieve in the earth. And we can go even before this, can't we? If you turn back a little bit to Genesis 6, the same sort of thing happened in the days of the flood. Let's just read a few verses from Genesis 6 and see a very similar situation here. So it says, Genesis 6 and verse 1, it came to pass, when men began to multiply on the face of the earth, and daughters were born unto them, that the sons of God saw the daughters of men, that they were fair, and they took them wives of all which they chose. And the Lord said, my spirit shall not always strive with man, for that he is also flesh. Yet his days shall be 120 years. There were giants in the earth in those days. And also after that, when the sons of God came in unto the daughters of men, and they bare children to them, the same became mighty men which were of old, men of renown. And God saw that the wickedness of man was great in the earth, and that every imagination of the thoughts of his heart was only evil continually. So what then were the imaginations of the hearts of the people in those days? How advanced was this civilization? We can only guess, we're not told. But when you think about the lifespans of people in those days, of hundreds of years, you can imagine that they were perhaps quite an advanced civilization, that they would have perhaps achieved quite a lot in their 900 years or so in their lifespan. So we can wonder at just how advanced this civilization might have been, and the kinds of things that they were trying to do to sort of challenge the need for a God. And maybe the situation around the flood was similar to what happened later with Babel. These were people who didn't want to worship God, who wanted to challenge the notion that they had to bow to his authority, and who thought that they could do everything for themselves. We read that they wanted to make a name for themselves. They were mighty men, men of renown. They wanted to be famous. They wanted to be celebrities. They wanted to be praised for all their achievements. And we look at that and we think of what happened later with Babel as being a similar sort of situation. Despite all of that intelligence and human achievement that must have been going on at the time, the one who was favoured, the one who was allowed to live, was the one who stood apart and believed the Bible. That was Noah and his family. They were the ones who survived the flood, weren't they? We could go even further back and look at how technology is seen in Genesis 4 as well. There was a family there, Lamech's family, who achieved great things with what they were able to do. This was a family who, if you just come back to Genesis 4 and verse 19, let's read about the days of Lamech. Lamech took unto him 2 wives, Genesis 4:19. The name of one was Adah, the name of the other Zillah. And Adah bare Jabal. He was the father of such as dwell in tents and of such as have cattle. His brother's name was Jubal. He was the father of all such as handle the harp and organ. And Zillah bare Tubal-Cain, as an instructor of every artificer in brass and iron. Here's technology again, isn't it? That the ability to forge metals into tools, the ability to make musical instruments for entertainment, the ability to herd cattle and have a system of trade, no doubt, based on cattle. This is all technology in the ancient cultures here that we read of. And we wonder how far they were allowed to get, because we seem to be showing that this technology was not used for good purposes. These were not good men and women. These were not God-fearing men and women that we're reading about here. So we wonder at how far God allowed that to get before it was stopped. And we keep seeing this pattern of God is the one who is in control all of the time. God can stop these things if he wants to. And there's no reason for us to think that it's any different today. God is still the sovereign Lord of the universe. God is still the one who has control over all of these things. Let's have a look at another thing the Bible teaches us then. God promised that he would not destroy the world again. Come with me to Genesis 8 now. And after the flood happened, after Noah and his family have survived, God makes this promise to him. And it's in Genesis 8 and verse 22. Let's read verse 21 as well. The Lord smelled a sweet savour, the offering that Noah had made to him. And he said, I will not again curse the ground any more for man's sake. For the imagination of man's heart is evil from his youth. Neither will I again smite any more everything living as I have done. While the earth remaineth, seed time and harvest, and cold and heat, and summer and winter, and day and night shall not cease. This promise is made to Noah, that as long as these things endure, the world will not be destroyed. God will not flood the world again, as he has just done. And that promise, of course, still stands for us today. God remains in control of this world, and he will not allow the world to be destroyed, whether that's by floodwater or by the onset of technology. God's whole purpose is to fill the earth with his glory through people. That's his intention. That's why there has always been a faithful group of believers in the earth, and always will be. And he has promised that one day the whole world will be full of his glory, and that Jesus will reign in a worldwide kingdom. We can read about those promises, and they'll be subjects for another evening. But we know that hasn't happened yet, so it must still be a future promise. So God can stop the ultimate calamity happening because his promises have not yet come about, and God doesn't lie. But just look at how far we are pushing God. It's really interesting to see headlines like this with regard to this technology. Here is an engineer who hopes to build an AI God with its very own religion. This is from a few years ago, actually. Someone who wanted to try and set up a whole religion based around an artificially created God, because people think they're better than God. People want to wipe out the need to have someone else in charge. People don't like that. More recently, Here's another report. We must slow down the race to godlike AI. Some people see the ultimate development of AI as to becoming like God, something that has control over our lives, something that people worship, in fact, and can't do without. Isn't it interesting how far we are pushing these things? Come back to Genesis 3. These are all very close together, all these references this evening. AI makes us like gods. That's what we're seeing in these headlines. And where have we heard words like that before? Well, it's from the serpent in Genesis 3, verse 4. The serpent said to the woman, "Ye shall not surely die, for God doth know that in the day ye eat thereof, then your eyes shall be opened, and ye shall be as gods." Here is a chance for people to be like gods, says the serpent to Adam and Eve. And that's exactly what we're seeing in some of these comments and news pieces about AI today. Here is the chance for humans to be like gods. And these words from thousands of years ago are still relevant today, aren't they? People have this chance again to be like gods. And it's scary, isn't it, to look back and see the comparison with what happened right at the beginning, with those things that got mankind cast out from the garden, and those things which introduced sin into the world and death into the world. And here we're seeing the same sorts of things again. How relevant this technology is then to the ultimate fate of humankind. The serpent reasoned that it would be a good idea to eat the fruit, but it didn't have the wisdom to know and to respect God and his commands and what he had said to Adam and Eve. The serpent was persuasive, but not wise. Wisdom can't be something that beasts have, and it also can't be something that is learned by a machine. Machines don't have an ability to be moral. Machines don't have the ability to have their own emotions. They can only be programmed. They can't reach to the same level, can they, as humans? This is quite interesting to look at the release of this piece of software a couple of years ago called ChatGPT, which is showing the sort of level of intelligence that these machines have reached. So you can now go onto this piece of software called ChatGPT, and you can ask it to do things for you. You can ask it to write essays for you. You can ask it to do all sorts and to engage in a conversation with you, and it will chat to you as if it was a real person at the other end of the keyboard, typing back and responding to the things that you're saying to it. And it will create an essay for you, for example, or a thank you note, or anything you choose to ask it, that will seem as though it's been written by a human. It will contain very sensible words and sentences that look as though a human being has written them. And it can fool us into thinking that a human is behind it. But of course, there's only so far that it can go. Here we have a news piece about it that says the next version of it will be less likely to invent facts. The problem with it is that it makes things up. You can't trust it because it will pull things from anywhere on the internet, much of which isn't true at all. And it will make things up. It will refer you to books that don't exist and to people that don't exist. And you can't trust it to have any truth behind it whatsoever. And some people have talked about it as being inherently stupid. In fact, this isn't an intelligent thing at all. This is something that simply read all of the internet and can regurgitate as much of it as it wants to at a time. But actually, there's no intelligence really behind it that we would recognise as intelligence. There is a limit to what it can do. And we're a long, long way off at the moment from having technology that can do things like this. Despite what the headlines would like us to believe. But it's really interesting because, again, this reminds us a little bit of the serpent, doesn't it? The serpent did this. The serpent made something up. It said, "You can be as gods, you will have no need for God, Eve, if you eat this fruit, if you do these things." And in fact, the serpent was inherently stupid. It had the ability to think and to speak and all of these amazing things, but actually it couldn't teach anything. It couldn't act with wisdom. It couldn't impart the truth to Eve. And unfortunately, she failed to recognise it, as did Adam. And we ended up in the situation we're in as a result. But it strikes me there's an uncanny similarity again there to what the serpent did in Eden. So maybe we're not heading for the end of humanity with this technology, but we are heading for a judgment, just like in Babel, just like when the angels came down and stopped it. We are heading for something like that to happen again. And one of the signs we're given in the Bible that we are close to that time is what it says about these days that we're living in. So the Bible tells us that there will be a time in the future, to the Bible, when people will revel in technology like this, when people will love this sort of technology, when people will snap it up and invest money in it and live by it and hinge on its every word. There will come a time when people will do these sorts of things that we're seeing today. And we have $1 trillion industry today based around these sorts of things that people love and delight in. And we might wonder, how does the Bible know? How did the Bible predict today's time and things that are happening today when this sort of technology was, of course, completely unfamiliar to most of the Bible writers who wrote thousands of years ago? How did the Bible know about this? And of course, the Bible gives us a picture of what the last days would be like. And they were the days before Jesus would return to the earth, days that we're living in now. We speak of them as being the last days, just before Jesus comes. And in the second letter to Timothy, which we'll turn to now, Paul has some words of advice for a young man called Timothy, who is a believer and who is receiving this letter from him. So 2 Timothy we'll turn to now. And Paul is writing about what the world would be like in the time of the last days. And that's our day that we are in now. So 2 Timothy chapter 4, beg your pardon, and verses 3 and 4. And we're going to see just how relevant these words are to today. So 2 Timothy chapter 4 and verse 3, he says, "The time will come when people will not endure sound doctrine, but after their own lusts shall they heap to themselves teachers having itching ears, and they shall turn away their ears from the truth, and shall be turned unto fables." This is what Paul described the last days as being, and Paul knew about this because God had inspired him to write these words, and God knows the future. Let's just take some of those phrases one by one out of this passage here and look at what artificial intelligence is doing in parallel. So this phrase about people's lusts and having itching ears, that's a lovely expression that means people are hearing what they want to hear. They have ears that are itching to hear something that they like. And let's have a look at some things that are being written about artificial intelligence here. Here is a remarkable development where people are having relationships with these online robots. People say they are in intimate relationships with software, with chat robots that will say things to them that they want to hear. And Time magazine predicts that this is just the beginning. This is a phenomenon of people in this day and age, where they will actually form relationships with their own computers because they tell them things they want to hear. People are falling in love with their own creations, and it's all because they are saying the right things to them. And this is exactly what Timothy is being warned about all these years before, when these words are being written about the last days, about this time that we're living in. People will have itching ears, ready to hear what they want to hear. So I think that's a little bit scary, what we're reading about there. This idea of turning from truth to fables. People will want fables. They will digest and lap up fables instead of seeking out things that are true. And that's a very relevant phenomenon to today, isn't it? You can find all sorts of things online about the lies that AI is based upon. The promise of AI has delivered nothing but spam and fakery. The biggest problem with artificial intelligence, it lies. You cannot trust it to give you the truth. It will tell you what you want it to say. It will tell you something that looks very likely to have been written by a human. You cannot trust it to tell you something that is true. That last one there from The Guardian fairly recently, nearly 50 news websites are AI generated, a study says. Would I be able to tell? So you can go online and look at some of these websites and it will look as though you are reading things that are true, but you have no idea really whether they've been made up by a computer or whether they are actually true and written by someone you can trust. And that's the phenomenon, isn't it, of turning from truth to fables. People want to read something they like, but they no longer care whether it's true or not. And just think of the name we've been concerned about this evening, artificial intelligence, something that's artificial, something that's not actually true. It's an interesting take on the name, isn't it? And what about fake news, that phenomenon that's been around for the last few years? Fake news, news that is good to read but isn't actually substantiated or backed up as being true. You might remember Donald Trump rather liked fake news a few years back. It's all about being persuasive, isn't it, rather than actually delivering the truth to people. If you're still in 2 Timothy, just look back to chapter 3 a minute, the same letter, but chapter 3 and verse, where are we? Verse 4. So the same writer, Paul, is writing here about those that are lovers of pleasures more than lovers of God. That's what he says the last days will be like. There will be people around who will be lovers of pleasure more than lovers of God. And I suppose there's always been people like that, ever since the days of Timothy and Paul. But now society is really full of them, isn't it? It's full of people who delight in pleasure rather than in God or in a religion that keeps them grounded. And we can read all sorts of things about how artificial intelligence is driving this kind of age where people are lovers of pleasure. Here is an article that talks about people who are concerned with artificial intelligence becoming addicts because it gives them pleasure. And pleasure is like a drug, isn't it? If you keep having it, you want more of it. And here is an article that says the pursuit of AI is a bit like the pursuit of pleasure. And that's exactly what Timothy was being warned about as being a characteristic of the last days. Having turned away from God, what do people replace the spiritual awareness with, or that inner sense of peace with? What do they do with that God-shaped hole in their lives? Well, they look for temporary fulfillment. They look for temporary pleasure. They look for things that will give them joy in this world. And they find it to an extent, don't they? They find temporary pleasure. But that's all it ever is. It's not lasting fulfillment. It's not lasting peace. But nevertheless, people always want something to trust in. That's part of our human nature, isn't it? We want something to trust and to rely on and to give us a sense of happiness. Everybody wants that in their lives. But if people turn their backs on God, they try and find it in other places. And they spend their whole lives looking for it and perhaps never quite finding it. And so people look at the moment to technology to fill that need for them. And so all of this shouldn't surprise people who read their Bibles, because these things have been predicted, and this day and age has been predicted long, long ago. And what was Timothy told to do instead? Well, if you're still in chapter 3 there, look at verse 14. Paul advises him to continue in the things which thou hast learned and hast been assured of, knowing of whom thou hast learned them, and that from a child thou hast known the Holy Scriptures. And Paul says the thing you need to do, Timothy, and it's the best piece of advice, isn't it? The thing to do is to cling on to what you know is sure and certain, and not be distracted by anything that this world can offer. And the thing you know is sure and certain, Timothy, is the Word of God, is the Scriptures that you've known from a child, which are able to make you wise. Not intelligent, but wise. And that's the thing that matters, isn't it? That's the thing that Adam and Eve did not seek. That they sought intelligence rather than wisdom. But it's wisdom that we should be focused on, the thing that makes us wise. That's what he was told to do instead. And he was told to cling to something sure and certain. I've got my slides in the wrong order here. There are many people around who are very worried about artificial intelligence. Experts are writing these things. They are panicked about what is going to happen to our world if AI continues at the pace it is currently going at. And that was the spark for writing this talk, really. There is no assurance in AI, there's no basis for trust, but it is quite a scary thing that grabs hold of people's attention and that people are investing much money in at the moment to try and develop. But the thing for us to remember is the history of mankind contains many moments where knowledge has increased dramatically. And we're still here, aren't we? Because God is still in control. The thing we need to do is to focus on his word, where we find truth. We don't find it anywhere else in this world other than in the word of God, something that's been around for centuries, something that is there and consistent, even when everything else in the world is changing. And just think about other technology and other science that has been around and has been proved wrong over the years. You might think of the days when people believed the earth was flat, or the days when people didn't know that blood circulated, or that asbestos was a dangerous thing to build out of. All of these things, they change as the years go on, don't they? But the Bible doesn't. The things that are written there are consistent and are reliable and true. And we see in the Bible that God can and will stop anything that threatens humanity before it gets to the point where humanity is wiped out. He is the only God, and he is greater than anything that mankind can achieve. But we must trust him, and we must look to his word and remember that we are seeking wisdom and things that are true, and seeking God's glory over man's. And if we remember those things, then hopefully none of these things that we see on the screen should scare us too much, because we remember that God is ultimately in charge, and his promises will come true when Jesus returns to this earth.